Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the November meeting of the Philipstown Conservation Board. I'd like to introduce and welcome our newest member, Tony Bardis, who's sitting at the end.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, what I'd like to do is begin with approval of the minutes. So, do we have a motion for which would be September's minutes?
So moved.
Second? And all those in favor that were at the meeting?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. And for October's, which you
I
can't vote
cannot
on,
vote
you were
on.
not there. Do I have a,
Oh, I thought that was October.
that was September.
I was out September, so scratch me from September.
Okay, so, all right.
I did put my hearing aids in, but.
For September, we have 1, 2, 3.
Scott, were you
I
here?
don't think I was here in September. I wasn't here in September.
Do you have the meetings?
It'll say
Sure.
Yes,
I
you
think
were
Scott
there.
was
You
here
were, I
for
thought so.
September.
Okay?
You guys don't remember? I didn't remember, really.
Okay. You were there. Okay.
I missed one, I
Okay.
thought.
All right, now October. You can't
I'm
vote.
out.
Do I have a motion? Has everybody looked? Okay, second? And all those? Okay, 4. Okay. All right, we knocked that off. All right, let's move on to new business, which is Surprise Lake Camp. You didn't think you'd be first.
What's that?
You didn't think you'd be first.
Okay.
But I think it's going to be the easiest.
Okay, so I'm Nicholas Scott. Sorry. Good evening. For those who don't know me, I'm Nicholas Akatos. I'm doing the site work up at Lake Surprise Camp. There's been a couple things going through. There was a remediation project which has been all but completed, which leads us to this part. There was a new box culvert put in, which resolved all of the drainage issues and the backups and the DEC and all of that. There was a 4-court tennis court in place with some extra space, which was all macadam. That was removed and a 2-court put back. So where we are now is a much smaller impervious thing, because it's only 2 courts instead of the 4. We want to put topsoil around and finish. The thing that came up with all of this, and which why we're here, we'd like to put, because of where it's located, it's kind of isolated. So we're here and we're kind of all dressed up. So we'd like to put some conduits there for communication, which ties into the camp, telephone, because there's no cell service down it. For whatever reason in that area, there's no cell service. If we're going to open up a trench, which would be a minor trench, it's not frost protected, we'd like to put water, seasonal water, so they can maintain the grass and plants and things like that. So that's one thing. And then, you know, they did all this work to the courts. We'd like to put a perimeter drain around it so we can, there is a drain where previously was installed. It's pretty decayed now. It took water off the hill. Without that, when you do get runoff, it does flood. So we'd like to be able to protect the court, the new courts, discharge it where the old one was discharging. And that, with that being said, speaking with Max, that was kind of a change of use because there was no power there. We'd like to put a couple tennis courts in for some lights to make it safe to get in and out around the court. So that's where we're here. So the scope of work is really some conduits to have low voltage and power there, to have some water, a storage shed for some archery equipment, as well as regrass and topsoil. And then we spoke to Max about possibly planting on the one end that really delineates the wetlands is kind of, you know, a little bit removed, but just so that everybody knows where the play area is and where it's not. That's kind of it.
So I'm sure I've been over by the tennis court, but I don't really know it. Have you been there recently? Because I think where we're right now is whether this should be a minor application, which I have a feeling it should be.
Right. I think what I suggested to you earlier, Andy, was that we get out and look at the site and then make that determination out there.
Okay.
Yeah.
The biggest impact is the drainage, right?
Yeah, which really might not even be an impact because there's an existing drainage system there. So it's kind of just making sure that everything is brought up to speed. So I think there's more good going in there than what was there before.
Oh, just way more.
You know.
Including the box culvert, there's no more backups, there's no more sedimentation in that area, so it is. I mean, and like I said, whenever you want, we come visit.
When would you propose to do the work? You know, I know it's hard to tell with weather.
Yeah, at
but-
this point now, I'd probably, you know, like, setting some poles, possibly the drainage around the perimeter. It's kind of raw, like the court is good, we have all our silt fence up, but the area right there, because there was about 4 to 6 inches of macadam that was removed from where the old court is, and then we slid the court away from the wetlands, because we reduced by 2, so we moved it away from the wetlands. You know, it wouldn't be bad to get the drainage in if I could before the winter or the spring thaw, but after that, then any kind of topsoil work would have to wait till growing season, obviously.
Okay.
Was all the old macadam removed?
It was.
It's all off-site now?
That is correct.
It's gone.
It's a smaller mechanical footprint than it was before.
It's definitely 50%, it might even be 60% less, because there was 4 very large courts with some extra space, and we put 2 in. And again, we moved it further away from the wetlands.
Can I ask about the lights? Just, I know we're going to go out there, but the lights that you propose, are those for night tennis? So they'd be raised? Are they going to be dark sky compliant? I hope.
There really isn't a spec on it yet. We were talking about putting the poles in for it, because in order to do that work, once I topsoil, it'd be hard to do later. There really isn't a proposed spec for that. I'm sure after meeting with Cheryl, Adam, and the grounds people there, if you'd like it to be sky compliant, I'm sure it will be. So that's easy enough to make. It really is just for some ground lighting, and then the 4 corners of the court, yes, to be able to use it. It's not the US Open, it doesn't need to be lit like that, but again, it's a beautiful area now, and if they have the capabilities for safety and things like that, I'm sure they'll use it more.
So I think, any other comments? Otherwise, I think we need to schedule a site visit.
How do I schedule it? Got it. I'll take care of it tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, what works in the next couple weeks for everybody? Yep, I mean, what works for everybody in the next couple weeks? Is it better a weekday or a weekend?
We talked about doing these on weekends if
Yeah,
possible.
and it's gonna probably be a short site visit, it's not close to
I
where
can
anybody
do the
lives.
weekend of the
Thursdays are
19th.
easiest for me.
What's that?
For the next couple of weeks, Tuesdays through Thursdays would be best, for me personally, anyway.
I mean, the weekend's better for me, I mean, I'm just kind of packed, but, I
Right.
mean, I don't have to be there if you guys
Yeah, I
are there.
could go up on my own also, I was thinking.
Yeah. Go up.
I can't do 19th and 20th if we're doing a weekend. So I could do this weekend, but not,
Does it work for Rob?
This weekend, yeah.
Lou?
No problem with anything.
Yeah. This weekend, it would have to be in an afternoon for me. I couldn't do a morning. But I'm fine. You know, anytime after 1.
What day?
Saturday? How would the 12th be, like 1
I could do
o'clock?
that. But not morning?
I can't, normally I would love to do morning, I just can't this weekend.
So what time?
1 o'clock? That work?
Works for me. It's okay.
Work
with
for you?
me, guys.
Okay. We'll knock it
So
off.
if you guys come out, just drive right to the
Yep.
gate, and we'll park right there, because we just walk down the hill right there. So 1 o'clock this Saturday.
This Saturday.
Perfect. Do you need anything from me? Did I bring anything?
I don't think so.
Okay. I mean, I have all the other plans and stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just bring it in case, but I think we'll be good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry about that, Scott.
It's okay, I'm thinking, after you guys look at it, if you decide
Yeah.
you need somebody else, I'll come
Yep.
look at it again.
Okay, let's move on to Welcome Homes.
Chairman, members of the board, Steve Marino, Tim Miller Associates, representing Welcome Homes. We've been through a couple of meetings and had productive discussions, I believe, during those meetings. At the last meeting, we were asked to investigate a couple more possible issues, and we have done so. We made our submission, our timely submission for this meeting. And that submission included a more detailed mitigation plan, a more comprehensive overall mitigation plan, as well as consideration of a pre-treatment unit for the septic system. Mr. Sophias is here to talk about the pre-treatment system. We were able to get into and out of the health department in what seems like record time in order to get a pre-treatment unit that they're okay with in and approved in time for this meeting. So we do have approval on the pre-treatment for the septic. Just to go over real quickly, the more detailed mitigation plan, we're proposing to remove that trap rock gravel road that's ringing the toe of the slope around the construction site. We'll remove that and reseed and replant that. A number of trees and shrubs are spec'd out on the plan for that area. We are showing on the plan more specifically the location of the stormwater infiltration base practices, which we talked about in order to treat the runoff from the house. The driveway and other areas on the property will be pervious surfaces, but the house obviously will not. So there's treatment, capture and treatment of the stormwater runoff shown on the plan now. But, more detailed notes on the sequencing and planting and et cetera, monitoring and maintenance of the new plantings. And as well, I wanted to depict on this map the existing area that's already protected as per the original subdivision. That's this area in pink. There is a deed restriction for no construction in that area, and we were proposing to expand that just a little bit more to the west in order to include all of the wetland that is on that side associated with the Ansville Creek as it flows through the site. I think Mr. Sophias maybe can just very briefly bring you up to date on the treatment, on the pre-treatment plan, and then we'll hear what you folks have to say.
Good evening, everybody. Vigelis Sophias with Heartland Engineering. Since the last submission, we went ahead and researched a variety of products and consulted with the Department of Health. And what we've essentially landed on, I guess, is this product called manufactured by Fuji, the CEN5 model, which is essentially a treatment device that runs it through the system itself is comprised of 3 chambers. The first chamber is kind of like your traditional septic system where it separates the solids, and then it goes to the next 2 chambers, which goes through a variety of filter media that essentially cleans the effluent to a very high quality and then discharges it to the septic field. We still are keeping the traditional septic tank upstream of this new treatment unit that we have. So essentially the change that we have to the plan itself is the effluent will go from the home to the septic tank. From the traditional septic tank, it will go to the treatment unit. There it will go through a very high level of treatment and then discharge through to the septic field as shown on the plan right here. This product is widely used. First, originally started in Japan. There's thousands of these units that are installed there. It is also widely used in Long Island, just because of they don't have the infiltration rates that are in some of the other areas. So ultimately, the effluent that comes out of this is much higher quality, and I hope that meets the requirements. If there are any questions, please let me know.
I do have a question. I had gone on the website looking at the Fuji Clean, and not being an engineer, can the system work without an infiltration field?
Can it work?
Can it work without an infiltration field?
Yes. Because I guess if I'm understanding the question, so in Japan particularly, there is no septic field as we
Right,
have here,
that's-
and it is actually, they discharge this water into either the storm sewers in the street, or it just runs along in the gutter. So ultimately, the effluent that's coming out of the unit is acceptable to run on public right-of-way, if that,
Right, no, that's what I thought.
answers the question.
No, that's what I thought. So that, I think the question here, and I'm curious what our other board members think, is, we're dealing with a unfortunately grandfathered and somewhat untenable lot that the homeowner or prospective homeowner needs to be allowed to build something on. So, and I think that the Fuji system is, at least in my mind, definitely a very eloquent solution. I feel that at this point, it's too bad, and I think it is worth discussing further with Putnam County Board of Health of why a field is still needed, because there could be a lot less disturbance to the wetland buffer if there was not a field.
We have, to a certain extent, had that conversation with them in terms of the idea of reducing the size of the field, because it's really being used for discharge rather than treatment at this point. And they don't allow any reduction in the size of the field at all, even if you're pre-treating. So that's kind of how we ended up at this point. We would love to not have to clear the area and put the fields in, but they look at the pre-treatment structure as basically just that, but it doesn't really play into their calculations as to the effectiveness of the system, and they want a full septic system, discharge area installed regardless.
Is that maybe just to get rid of the water, just to discharge the water so that it doesn't have a runoff, like a runoff?
Exactly, but that's why in many municipalities, they do at least allow you to reduce the size of the fields, because they're not being used to treat anymore. It's really just for discharge. As long as you have the infiltration rates, get the water in there and the clean water in there and just let it trickle down. But in Putnam County, they haven't gotten to that point yet. I think that may have a lot to do with the fact that a portion of the county is located in the New York City watershed, and they don't want that kind of any of those kinds of technologies used in the watershed, so they've extended it to all of Putnam County because they don't want kind of to segregate watershed and non-watershed. So we're stuck with a full-size treatment system. I did look again, though, and the one benefit, but we aren't cutting down any sizable trees in the area of the septic field, at least. It's shrubbery, it's dense brush. Remember when we walked out there? There are trees, a few trees that are coming down in the area of the house. There's about 11 or 12 trees, 6 inches or greater, in the area of the house that are coming down. There's 20-something trees within the buffer and house envelope that are being left. So what we did look at the survey of the trees in the area of the septic, and at least aren't any significant trees coming down.
Comments from the board? Suggestions, comments, questions?
Yeah, I'm concerned with the maintenance of the system. How does that work? Does the homeowner monitor the maintenance? Does the health department do that?
It's the homeowner's responsibility to maintain this thing, but ultimately it is a low-maintenance unit, especially since it's going through a double septic field. So you're going through the septic system, the septic tank that collects, that's the first level of treatment, and then it goes to the next unit that does the higher effluent cleaning.
So would the homeowner have to track the maintenance to report to the health department, or it's just totally up to the homeowner?
It's up to the homeowner.
Tony, what we've done on some heat systems, which is another form of self-contained system, is we have put within the wetland permit conditions for usually an outside engineer to monitor the system.
Okay.
So there is a safeguard.
Yeah, we probably should do something similar.
Right. Other comments or questions?
And that's mostly just so that the technology is available to future owners, so that, that they can see the history, they can see what kind of, because sometimes people don't even know what a septic system is when they buy a house, so.
So what does that mean then? Are you requiring?
A maintenance agreement.
Just ensure that the maintenance is done correctly, it's written into the permit that this is a requirement that, you know, I don't know what we said, every 5 years, was it, or I don't remember.
I think with the peat systems, it was a monitoring, was it every 3 or 5? I think it was 3.
It needs to be based on best practice for this
Yeah.
particular
Yeah, it has to do
system,
with the
so we'd have
recommendations
to
are for
look
the
into
maintenance
that
of the
more.
system, so we need a recommendation as to what the manufacturer says for that. The peat systems were more often, I believe, right? 5 years, was it?
Yeah.
This may, I don't know what the recommendations are. Did you have any idea from the manufacturer of FujiClean, how often they say that this has to be serviced?
The service itself, the units, from our discussions with them, they could last 15, 20 years. The maintenance for them is just checking of the first unit, of just cleaning that out, just like how you would clean out a regular septic tank. So that's the majority of it. And then I've been told by manufacturers that, you know, some of these units are in the ground close to 25, 30 years. So the technology that is here is not new technology. You're looking at something that's been around for decades and practiced throughout the world, essentially. Not only the world, but in the United States and the various states. So I think the concern, or I would say that, again, that this is not new technology. It's proven over and over again. So to put that on to the homeowner may be, you know, an additional item that they have to.
There's no pump systems or anything like that, so gravity?
There is a pump system to it, yes.
So what could go wrong? Like what?
A pump can fail.
Yeah, I mean,
The
what
pump
could-
fails,
all
but
the-
there's also, there is like a control panel in the home that alerts the homeowner if something was to go wrong. So there is this alert system in place already. So it wouldn't be a situation where the component fails and there's untreated effluent that would go out to the field itself. So there is already this built-in component to it.
Based on the information that you shared with us in the packet, there's a blower, there's the alarm system that's hooked, I mean, there's more gadgets and gizmos with this system than with a traditional system. So, of course, even if it's a sturdy system, it's still got to be maintained adequately, and it's got to be checked on. And
Absolutely.
all, you know, just like any other homeowner responsibility for a system, right?
All right, we agree.
Yeah, I think if there's any sort of detail on timing in terms of, you know, if this anaerobic media needs to ever be changed, aerobic media, like who monitors the conditions within the tank? So like for the peat systems and what the board's referring to, the maintenance agreement really just goes into the specs of that system and says, yeah, maybe every 5 years you need to look and see if the peat's functioning still, does it need to be replaced? I think it has a 20-year lifespan, the peat itself, before you need to dig it out and replace it. So even with these individual specs on this system, if those bullet points could be met, you know, with some sort of a timetable that could be agreed upon by the board, that some professional would come in and inspect that, or someone could sign off on an inspection saying that all those things are functioning correctly after X amount of years, you know, at 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, or whatever that may be. That's kind of a similar document to what we're discussing, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I think something like that, you know, we should be able to accept something like that over, you know, five or 10 year period, that a professional comes in and looks at it and issues a letter that it's functioning correctly.
Part of routine maintenance.
And that's benefit to essentially it's a benefit to the owner as well, that their piece of equipment is running correctly.
It's no different than any turnover package you would do, right, for a homeowner, so.
And then Max and I were discussing the mitigation plan, which you might be a little bit more concise than I am, but we were not sure it was necessarily quite detailed enough. Also, we had brought up concerns at the last meeting that we wanted to keep clearing to a minimum because basically everything is within a buffer. And I don't think, myself, I don't know if it's necessarily clearly stated well enough within this plan. I think it's something that needs to be addressed.
I think our only response to that would be is that when you look at the size of the parcel, when you look at the amount of area that's going to be deed restricted from any further use in the future, when you look at the limits of where our mitigation plan extends, when you look at the existing, with the proposed retaining wall on that northwest corner of the site, this is a family home. There are children involved in this, and they do need some area to play. I mean, the septic system certainly opens up an area where that'll be grass. There'll be some area behind the back of the house up to that retaining wall. Below that retaining wall, there's no reason for us to mow or clear down there. So it's the envelope here around the house. We're showing several trees on that knob on the highest point of the property that will be preserved. Clearing won't be necessary there. To limit any, honestly, I think to limit any more the amount of area that can be cleared and maintained starts to really squeeze the property further than it already is.
Steve, this property is constrained. And whoever's building a house on here should be aware of that. And that, building a house on a lot like this does not privilege you to having a lawn or a play space for your kids. It just doesn't. If they've chosen this lot, then you have to work with the lot. And yeah, there's the leach field. That's got to be lawn because it's got to be cleared. But there's no right to having a lawn in a space that's in the middle of a wetland buffer. You know what I mean? I don't think it's fair to say a family's moving in here, they're buying it, they're building it, so they should have a lawn. That doesn't make any sense.
Only from the standpoint that it's fair to say that, again, it's going to be a family home. We're trying to minimize the envelope as much as we can. We're asking for the area where the septic is and some area behind the house up to that retaining wall. I don't know how much more of a point I can make of that. You guys will have to make the final call on that. But, again, large area of the property is going to be encumbered and not be usable anyway. And again, we understood that coming in.
Right. It's
The planning board probably understood it up to a point when they approved the lot. I think we've made the point in the past that what we're showing as the house location and the septic location are very consistent with the schematic conceptual plan that was shown on the original subdivision plan. So we are trying to keep to that. We're not trying to encroach any further anywhere else on the property. This knob here, we're not planning on regrading it, so it's going to be there. And there's probably not much value in trying to clear that area and cut down trees because just the steepness of it and the rocky nature of it doesn't really lend itself to a backyard kind of situation anyway. So that wouldn't be cleared. So it's really this. Really is this rectangular area there is what we're looking to have cleared in order to maintain the yard area.
But just because you feel it couldn't be cleared doesn't mean some future land, owner couldn't come in and say, you know what, that's all full of weeds, I'm going to rip it apart, because we've seen that recently in the last meeting.
I understand, but I don't know how else to enforce some kind of a restriction on just a 50-foot radius area around a rocky outcrop or any other way.
What we have done in the past a few times is we have delineated a specific end zone of that can be maintained, and it's been put in the deed, and I think we've normally used something very non-invasive, like a post and rail fence to delineate it. And that's what I think we were, beginning to discuss last week, and I think that's important to come up with a plan of where that can be. The other thing I feel is I'd still like to give it one more shot. I'd love to be in a position where our board could talk to the Board of Health and give them our opinion that we feel that the Fuji system with either no or a more minor drainage field would make sense. And it would also save money to the homeowner.
We would welcome that correspondence on your part in order, if something could
I think
be.
we need to move into that.
Because if we don't, certainly if we don't need to excavate that portion of the site, if we don't need to install those trenches, and like you say, all the cost involved in, with doing that, if the health department is okay with not doing it, then.
Yeah, then it becomes a win-win for everybody.
Yeah.
So maybe, does that make sense to everybody?
That would be, Andy, is if you suddenly then have water coming, you know, there's gonna be flowing water there because it's not, I don't know where it
If
would
I
be.
may ask a question, Andrew Vaccaro with Welcome Homes, also here with Richard Hunt, the property owner sitting with us tonight. We did go through that process though and asked the health department for that specific question, and we did get that pretty clear response that wasn't going to be a possibility to eliminate that field or even reduce it. So just going back to them to ask them the question again, I just don't know if we're going to get much of a different answer by going back to them. I also would like to point out that Richard's been through this process. We're here 5 months now, and Richard's very much looking forward to moving into the area, but also overall the project has been taking some time, and he has some constraints, especially with moving forward with the construction loan and financing and things like that. And whatever we can do to continue to move this process forward, we were hopeful to potentially close it out tonight with you guys, if at all possible. Your comments about the mitigation plan are all well noted and received, and we'd be glad to include additional measures in the condition of approval if you guys see so fit. But again, the reason I'm bringing this up is just the fact that Richard's here and he's looking to move forward, and we would really like to ask for your consideration for a vote tonight. And going back to the health department, I don't know if, from my experience, it's going to give us much of a different result. So just bringing up this discussion for that very reason.
Were you suggesting that they go back to the health
No,
department, or that we go to the
we
health
go.
department?
Yeah, but not maybe just in general, I thought we talked about last time to kind of have a workshop or something like that to try
Right,
and get
but-
some kind of standards here. So maybe as part of that discussion, separate from this project. so
Yes,
not to-
but, in lieu, my thought was that between Max and myself, we very quickly, in the next few days, draft a memo to the Board of Health and see what we can get out of them. Because does anybody feel that we have enough here to vote on a permit tonight?
What's the benefit of eliminating them? I mean, to me, I only see a benefit of having them rather than eliminating them. I don't see the benefit of, trying to eliminate them. It's,
Theoretically, the system should work that everything flows down, that if the system is sized properly.
And it's treated. The whole idea is that this is like a mini waste treatment plant,
But so
right?
why then, what's the benefit of removing the fields? I mean, it's just the water's gonna flow into that and just go down.
Less disturbance.
It's just from the construction standpoint.
Yeah.
Significantly, because you have to realize they're dealing, part of where the field would go is, it's a slope. I mean, it has to be under 15%, but it's towards the edge of that. So I remember, I think when we were out in the field, we had discussed it, and it was a mixture of, because normally if you were filling it, that's just a lot of fill, but it was a mixture of a little bit of fill and cutting. And if that could be stopped, I mean, that's a big plus. And it would save a lot of money as well.
It would still have to be installed, though, in order to discharge too.
Yeah.
It's not going to be surface discharge. We certainly don't want to run a pipe down to the existing stream. So something of some sort would have to go in.
I don't see too much of a benefit of removing it, plus to hold them up, but I mean, we could certainly talk to them about it, but, I mean, you still need some kind of structure to put the water into it, maybe you reduce it, I see it as a minor benefit, but maybe you're seeing something I don't, so.
Yeah, as I said, I'm not the expert, but I thought a system like this, particularly if the soil is right, it's going to go straight down.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
if
did
it's
they give
sized
you any,
properly.
did they give you any insight as to the engineering, rationale behind why they couldn't reduce the trenches? Or
I
just-
think the
just
way that I'm
on
understanding it
principle?
is that they accept the treatment device and they allow it, but they're not giving us credit for the treatment per se with that. And so they are still giving us the credit for the treatment with the trench disposal itself. So in their eyes, I mean, us having this conversation, we all understand that the additional benefit we're going to get from going through that treatment device and that effluent's going to have a much higher quality when it reaches those fields. But in the health department's eyes, they're not viewing that as a treatment device.
They may not have guidelines that enable them to make a decision like that on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, they
Right.
probably are relying on, okay, well, it's fail-safe. If they rip out the filters and they don't put anything in there, at least it goes through the normal system.
Right.
Maybe, so.
And the trenching as proposed, they're also, I'm assuming, unless they've given you a waiver, there's the expansion area.
Yes, there's an expansion area to the
Expansion area, yeah, that's part of that.
That, great, that
rectangle.
showed, yeah, so,
That has to be cleared too?
yeah.
Not immediately. That would only need to be cleared if the existing system fails and.
So where is the expansion
Oh, they're not making you clear it anymore when you put in the system?
Not to my knowledge.
No,
Okay.
the expansion area should not have to be cleared unless it was needed for use in the future. So
That's
They
unusual.
used
This
to
area
make-
is the primary
They
field.
used to make you do that.
Yeah, that is
You had
very
to clear
unusual.
everything.
That area will need to be, it will need to be cleared.
That's what I-
Sorry.
Yeah,
That's
that's
what
what
I
I thought.
They're gonna make you
The
clear
purple
both?
No, no.
no,
twin.
I'm sorry, this is the primary field area, this is the reserve field area.
Right.
And they both have to be clear.
Yeah.
That's a lot of
Yeah.
space.
This is the.
That's the primary.
It's bigger than the footprint of the house.
Oh,
and
okay.
driveway.
I thought it was the little blurb above the green line. That's fine.
So this is gonna be an unpopular notion, I recognize, particularly for the homeowner. Steve, you know me. Because of the constraints of this site, the really, really highly unusual constraints, and the fact that today we all know that this would never have passed muster, but it's grandfathered in, so I respect the fact that, you have a right to build on it. Smaller house, two-bedroom house, smaller septic field.
And I think, understanding
Putting it
your
out there,
concerns,
just putting it out there.
we did have a brief discussion about this at the last month's meeting. And
Sorry, I missed
the
that.
point that I brought up last time was that, Richard is moving into the area with his family, a young family. Already it is a modest-sized home, 3 bedrooms. So we did consider that when we were going in and designing this house, that what can we do to reduce disposal area needed to do this? And we did come up with a 3-bedroom design for that. I don't think a 2-bedroom is going to be feasible for his personal situation with his family and a growing family. Hence why we've landed at this 3-bedroom, but comment noted.
I mean, what about going back to your point, Andy, about kind of delineating the backyard area and then maybe segregating that from the expansion area and the primary fields and looking at the management of those areas in the best possible way for natives, for anything that could be included in on the mitigation plan, where that fence, once you cross that fence, you're only maintaining that area for, at the minimum. That would promote potentially, if you're gonna like plant it with a native seed mix, you maybe are only mowing it once a year. Yeah. And you show on your plan that backyard area and segregate it completely from these areas that you're gonna be, excavating and filling.
So you're proposing having a physical fence proposed on the project to delineate the unmaintained area
Yeah.
from the lawn area?
Yeah, and have an access point so that he can go and mow there or whatever.
Yeah,
I
we're
mean,
not
does it
talking
really have to
about
be a fence?
chain link. We're talking like a post and rail or,
Couldn't it just be
stone.
markers? I mean, does it really
I
have
think
to
it
be-
needs to be permanent, because if he sells the house, then,
But if there's markers there, like.
It's really
they-
hard for
yeah.
that to be,
Yeah.
that the visual delineation is important for enforcement, I think.
yeah, what about even like a split rail fence, something like that,
So Rich, what are your thoughts on the split rail fence at that area along the perimeter?
Yeah, that's fine.
So just to clarify, the split rail fence you would be looking for along the bottom, basically at the toe of that slope?
No, even closer to the house, so you know, if you were to draw maybe a line, I don't know, you guys would have to propose something, but if you, and that the board would be able to look at, but, if you were to draw a line, you know, from the end of your retaining wall and keep it on the west side of those trenches all the way down, and have a smaller backyard area, and then say that everything on the east side of that fence is unmaintained or maintained once a year for native pollinators that would also achieve a functional septic field. And, you know, and that split rail fence could have like a gate that he could drive through with a mower to maintain it once a year. But I'm just proposing, this is like a thought, you know, like there could be a way to expand that.
To clarify, so Rich, he's talking about a split rail fence pretty much
field.
connecting to the
I'm
retaining
happy
wall
to play.
and pretty much extending along back here,
No, like
right on the outside of
on the
those.
west, on the west side of where you point, yeah, down, like that,
In front of the septic as well?
yeah. And
You
y-
talk
and then-
about the septic being one of the areas that might be acceptable as being maintained as lawn, since it has to be cleared and graded.
I was
anyway.
just saying, what if the septic,
If we could bring the septic and maybe just keep the expansion area outside that fence or
so
something?
they've got a place to play and then everything else is, you know, natural and, I don't know.
I mean, how big would the backyard be if you did keep the septic out of it, you know, out of your backyard, essentially, and create a
Well, if you
low,
look, the footprint of the house is about 2,000 square feet, and that area behind the house up to the retaining wall is about the same size as the I mean, the 2,000 square foot backyard is really, if you're talking about we have several acres of property we're talking about here, and they have a 5,000 square foot backyard. And I understand the restrictions on the property.
Have a super, yeah, constrained piece of property.
There's a practical aspect
So,
to it too.
would you like more time to think about this, or what?
We'd be happy to sketch something up and get it to you. My concern is
So-
that we would get that to you in time for the next meeting, and then we would be.
We come over
negotiating
here,
the final resolution
and it would go
next
around the
meeting,
back?
And then maybe we're in January, and again, he has.
I mean, I think if you were to, and, you know, preliminary drawings could come to us first, I think we would be in a position to vote.
yeah. I mean, the only other things that I saw with the maintenance.
Everybody agree with that?
The only, Andy, just one more thing about the actual mitigation plan, is just the maintenance and the, you know, control of the invasives, coming up with a good strategy to really like knock that back, other than, I don't know what you propose here, if it's just mechanical
I have a
removal.
more detailed spec for invasive removal that I'll put on the next copy of the plan.
Yeah. So that's another point. And then also, you know, I don't know if the board wants to look into, it's a 3-year plan. The first year in the spec says that they're gonna be visiting it every week in that first growing season, and then the subsequent years, it's twice a year for the remaining 2 years, which seems low for
Yeah.
us.
It would be a 5-year plan, I would think, minimum.
Right.
And what about the frequency after that first year?
I think we need to look at what would be proposed for controlling and managing the invasives on the project site, essentially. You know, and also the survivability of all the plants that you're putting in. If they all die, you know, and you're only visiting it twice a year, I don't know if that, you know.
It doesn't give you any opportunity to, say, replant in the same growing season, you have to wait a whole.
You know, I think it's workable. I mean, I think I think there's something there. I don't, you know, I'm only proposing, I know I'm not pointing on your map there, but on your plan, but I think if you could tell us, or tell the board, maybe in square footage, what you'd be comfortable with in terms of delineating that backyard area versus, I mean, it is a constrained site. I don't know. You know, I don't.
We'll get a sketch to you by the end of the week, as to what we think.
I mean, the pro and con is, the con is using the septic field and the expansion area. It's a touch further away from the house
Yeah.
than what would be. But at the same time, as it is right now, looking at the topo, it's slightly less steep. And once the expansion and the septic is actually constructed, is gonna be significantly less steep than what's straight behind the house. And I know we would definitely not allow more excavation for a lawn back there with everything else that's being done.
And it's gonna be flat. If you want to play space. it's gonna be flat.
I don't think we're not showing it as
Ish.
flat. Where's the grade from the house, the Gillis, from the back of the house to that retaining wall?
Excuse me, sir, can you use the microphone?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just asking the question in terms of the grade of that backyard area between the house and the retaining wall. I don't recall what the top of the wall elevation was, and
It's about a 7-foot grade change from the building out to the retaining wall.
so it's not flat. We're not proposing it to be flat.
Where where the leach field is, where the,
Well, leach field is going to be about a 15%, 13 to 15% slope anyway.
okay.
So we're still showing about a 7-foot drop from the back of the house to the retaining wall. We're not trying to make the whole back of the property flat.
Leveled out.
The septic field is also about 7-foot grade change.
It is?
Yes.
Okay.
It's not flat.
Okay, I thought you were doing like cut and fill.
No, no.
Okay.
No, that was one of the waivers that we obtained with the Department of Health in order to have that slope. So ultimately, the terrain that we see here is going to be essentially maintained. Yes, there
This
will
is gonna
be
be-
some smoothing out for sure, but the whole how this again, how the terrain is kind of sloping up, we are maintaining that. We're just smoothing it off essentially. And what we're doing is pulling the contours. Basically, we are pulling the contours in this, let's call it the playground. I do a lot of school work, so that's why I say playground. But this play area that's where we're spraying the contours out a little bit, so you have this more traditional play area. But the rest of the site, I mean, the contours are overlapping each other. It's just, naturally, when we excavate for the septic field, you have to regrade it, and we're regrading it smoothly, essentially.
Well, I think that's kind of the point that I was making here, is that, if you were to take that fence and just make that your delineation of your play area, which you're achieving with your new elevation to that retaining wall, and then putting in your split rail fence and allowing it to wrap around the west side of your expansion area and the fields, and you just maintain that as native meadow, and
Max, why don't you?
I can do a plan.
My concern is that if we go to the west side of the fields, then we really reduce the size. Now we're almost talking 3,000 square feet. It's not.
But even if you were to come down here and then wrap this way, right? Or wherever this ends, I'm not sure where this ends. I'd have to, you'd have to go out there and look. And then you would mow this for with whatever frequency would allow the minimal amount of maintenance there.
Once or twice a year.
Right. And so you'd have your finished lawn space here, right? On the west side of that constructed fence. And then that would be a permanent line where you could still access that part of your property, but it'd be maintained with native wildflowers, things like that, like a meadow.
Okay. Well, it sounds like Richard is amenable to that, so I think that's a good suggestion and a good middle ground here. I think that would work out well for his needs for the space, so understood.
Okay. So I think there's a couple items that we need to just, I guess it would be an amendment to the restoration plan, essentially, or the mitigation plan.
I'll show you what that's on the plan.
I think we also need more detail of what's going to happen in the quote-unquote lawn area, because it sounds like there is going to be grading, minor grading. Yes?
In the lawn area behind the house?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be.
Yeah, so so on your next plan, that needs to be within the plan and shown specifically.
I mean, the grading lines are shown on the plan. And the
Right,
retaining
but how
wall.
much, what amount of fill is going to be brought in, if anything, and so on? What
Well,
type
Cross
of,
section through there?
I think all of that's detailed on the civil engineering plans. This is more focused on the plantings themselves, but all of that detail has been worked out on Heartland's
Yeah,
plans.
on our plan, we have a cross-section essentially from the building all the way down to the end of the septic field. Would that be sufficient?
I think so.
Yeah,
Think
so
so.
yeah, that's on our plan, and we could provide it as an exhibit.
All right, so I think our plan is you're gonna get us revised drawings ASAP. We'll look at them, everybody will look at them. If we have any comments, major comments, we'll ask for changes. And the game plan hopefully will be at the next meeting to vote on this. At worst, there might be some, there might be, a few contingencies that we ask.
What about the frequency of the monitoring of the mitigation?
Needs to be in
Yeah.
there, yes.
So if you can up it to a 5-year plan and some of those details we've done on other projects, and then also the maintenance agreement, we should just look and see if you can get any additional details on benchmarks for the system to fail at potentially that need to be looked at. Right, yeah. And then we can just include that in that new submission. I think those are the major points, right?
We can provide that.
It'd be nice to get something from the manufacturer, what they recommend as far as maintenance goes.
Sure, we can provide the spec sheet.
They may even have a maintenance agreement. And all of those peat systems, all the companies that sell those peat systems, they have like an actual maintenance agreement that's like, it's just boilerplate. That's a starting point for people to approach
I didn't see anything
municipalities.
here, but.
Understood. Okay.
I have one last question, and it's just been eating me up inside, and I wasn't here last month, so maybe you answered this, but you submitted this in your packet, and it's from the Department of Health, but I can't read any of the text in here, and it says date of previous approval, and I don't know what the date is.
Yeah, we can provide those dates. It's unfortunate, it's the application is like carbon paper, and we get the fourth sheet as the approval, hence this,
This has happened so many times with the sheets.
I'm just really curious. So anyway, if you could just, while you're doing the other stuff, if you could just give us that date. I just am curious as to when it was last approved before this. Thanks.
Then, did you also confirm, because that was actually the question I said last week, did you confirm where the wells were? Because I know in the past, sometimes when it hasn't been on the sheet or it's unreadable, we've had surprises that there was a well nearby. So it would just save everybody a lot of headache just if you could do a survey, verify that.
the well swings? Yeah, the existing septic field is on this side, and then the water well you're referring to, right?
The well, yeah.
Yeah, that's not even on the map, but we could.
Okay, and where's his well?
It's
That's his well. Okay. Where's the next nearest homeowner's well?
For this, it's right here.
Right there, okay. Where's the nearest homeowner's well?
This is the new homeowner. That's
The next house over.
It's further
Right,
up.
that's
this
way off the
yeah.
map then, okay.
It's further up.
But we've had surprises in the past, so.
The only other thing too is your erosion control. Just showing, I don't know if any of your engineered drawings have that. I'm not looking at them right now, but making sure that you have.
Our civil plans do show the erosion
Okay.
control measures, yep. Okay.
Okay?
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you. Mr. Prins.
January 1st, January 6th. Is the approval of
What was the year?
this year.
No, I'm asking the previous approval.
Yeah, so
Listed.
we just had it approved a couple weeks ago, and the original approval for this one that we did was earlier this year in January.
Okay, thanks. I was just wondering when it was originally approved, because
It was a while ago.
yeah, there's a significant gap between January of this year and the last one.
Mr. Prins, thank you for your patience.
Yeah, I've got all night, no election returns for a while yet, right? First, I guess, is maybe the dock.
Yes, I'm glad you brought it up, because that's what I was
I
going
would
to
have forgotten
suggest.
it, but I wrote it in the corner.
So you've gotten so far permits from DEC, New York State DEC, and the Army Corps.
I got New York State, and I got the Army Corps, and the no action letter from the DEC. It does
Right.
not require DEC approval.
So I think most of us have been out there and are familiar with where Mr. Prins would like to put a dock is an existing bulkhead dock. And he'd like to add a, we'll call it a floating dock.
Right, and I think I have now found a mechanism that will enable me to eliminate that cantilevered deck that I was going to put over the northwest corner in order to have enough room to both park a boat and then bring it alongside the floating dock.
Okay.
And I have found a set of stairs that basically folds down and can flip right up onto the pier. So it's actually going to be simpler than what we drew and what we got the permits for.
What is everybody's thoughts?
Well, as long as the river people think it's okay.
Yeah.
Army
Yeah.
Corps and so forth.
I mean, we had that, at the last meeting, we talked about this in detail.
That was, I think,
That was
April.
it. It was.
Yeah, it was a long time ago.
I
So,
think the conditions
I mean, I
were-
think,
yeah.
correct me if I'm wrong, I think we can vote on this. I think basically what we're gonna need from you is, what components you're actually using and what it's, when I say what it looks like, a simple plan, which I'd rather come from either the manufacturer or whoever is gonna install it, rather than yourself. But I think we can vote on that, and that's just the contingency we're looking for. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right?
Yeah, my next job would be to find a dock builder, but I can tell you that what's going to hold the boat and what's going to hold the dock is something called tide slides, which are hurricane rated, and they're the best thing going. And in fact, the woman at New York State, when she called me to say, your permit's coming this morning, you really picked a smart thing when you picked tide slides. They're the best. The dock itself is likely to be either easy dock, which are modules that you attach together. The heaviest one I would use is 150 pounds, basically, so that two people can get it out and up to the shore in the wintertime. Or there's an outfit called Can Dock. It's up in Canada, and it makes 20-inch square modules, which you attach together in pretty much the same fashion. That way it's easy to get in, easy to get out, for wintertime.
So we can vote, you can vote on a permit, a conditional permit, so once we receive your final, what you've decided upon, send it into the building department, and then we'll cut the permit from the town.
Okay, as long as I've got that, then I feel confident going to find whoever I'm going to get to look at that pier and say, oh, it's still in good shape, or you really should do X, Y, and Z to it before you put this in, and then help me actually install the tide slides. That's not something I want to do myself.
Yeah, I mean, if you come to anything that would change the scope of what you presented to the DEC or Army Corps in terms of when the professional comes out to look at it, obviously that would kind of nullify our conditional permit if there were major changes that need to be made.
Yeah. Well, as I said, if anything, it's going to be simpler than what I went to the Army Corps with.
Yeah, I mean, I see the most major, which is still very minor, is you're going to be drilling. So there will be some dust or rubble coming out, but I'd like to think that the dock
Yeah, but you can,
is,
you can hold
there's
a,
nothing toxic, and they're going to be using hydraulic cement. So, are we comfortable with voting?
I'm comfortable with that.
Okay, do I have a motion to issue a conditional permit?
I make a motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Great, thank you. If I could make two comments on the Fuji Clean thing. Based on my research, because that's what we were proposing to use, that system takes care of itself for a long time, except for one thing, which is the blower. And that's the thing that he mentioned. There's actually a warning system. And the manufacturer says roughly every 5 years, you got to put a new blower motor in. Second, when you go to the county, my recollection from all the research I did on this is the county can give an exception from anything it wants to, if it really wants to. And it can even give an exception from the state requirements. The state requirements, if I remember them correctly, are if you put in a FujiClean, you get, it's either 30% or 50% credit on your field size. You don't get to eliminate it, but as I said, in theory, the county could say, we'll let you eliminate it.
Yeah, I mean,
So that may be helpful in what you go, and you may say, hey, I'm just asking you to use the state standard. Why can't you use the state standard on this side of the county where we're not in the watershed?
I think that was Andy's point, I think that's why having that discussion with the Department of Health is really important in situations like this.
Yeah, I still think you and I should put together a memo and contact the Board of Health.
Yeah.
Because it's a lot of clearing.
Yeah.
So, no, we appreciate that.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Now, what do you want to hear? What do you want to talk about with the pool and the addition?
If you're not uncomfortable, MJ, I'm going to let you begin because you weren't at the last meeting, but you did go through the minutes and had some questions.
I did. Okay, where do I begin? I had some questions on your narrative that you created for us, and thank you for making it in such large font size.
I'm in my 70s, so I know what it's like.
Getting off the computer after a full day and then having to go read through stuff, this is much welcomed. So I just had some questions as I saw this narrative, and I might have missed this before when you mentioned the atrium and the walkway that would connect the pool house and the new section of the house that you're proposing. I had missed that in the previous plan. I don't know why.
Okay.
But it's above, so it's like a bridge.
Yeah.
Is it a covered bridge?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I've seen them. It's a beautiful house down in Croton that I think Gropius did, where he did a covered walkway all the way up to the guest house, but
Yeah, there's another one in Garrison. that
I
uses
doubt we
that
would
kind of-
cover it.
Yeah. Okay, that was one of my questions. And do you have square footage? Because I feel like I'm getting some numbers, but I couldn't calculate it myself. Do you have the square footage of the footprint for the pool and plus the pool house?
Well, the pool will now
For
be.
the footprint,
Yeah,
footprint.
yeah, so the footprint 17 by 48, so that's,
And that's
it's about 820 square feet probably. And then the coping around the pool. And the pool house itself is about 350 square feet.
When you say the coping is the 4-foot?
No, there's a 1-foot stone coping around the perimeter of the pool.
Okay. What am
So
I
then in
thinking?
reality, the dimension of the pool would be 18. No, it would be actually, I have to add 2. It would be 19 by 50.
But it says in your narrative that you want to have at least a 4 foot of excess.
Right,
What
and
would that
that's
look
what
like?
it shows on the plan, is there's basically 4 feet around it before you get to any wall,
And that's deck,
and that would be pervious deck.
pervious
Or,
deck.
or stone with, the way I've done it before, is I lay the stone and I have about a 1/4 inch, and it's on a bed of sand.
Yeah.
And it just sits there and drains great.
Is that what you mean by, what do you mean by pool deck non-steep slope?
Part of the pool deck is not in steep slope.
And then,
If you look at the west and the south and part of the east, and even part of the north, are not steep slope. That's the white color.
right, in map 2A, you have a gray polygon with a 100 overlaid on top of it.
Yeah.
Is that considered, I mean, how is that considered non-steep
That's the
slope?
100-foot, that 100-foot, and the brown one with the addition is the excess allowance that might conceivably, or some part of it might be used in the process of rock chopping.
But it says new structure, is that a different shade than new structure floors?
I'm sorry, I couldn't quite get that.
There's a polygon that you've labeled new structure floors. Is that not that same color?
Well, that's the gray in the non-steep slope area of the pool house. It's kind of the southern half of the pool house. And the retaining wall for the pool, you
Right.
see that's in gray.
So you wouldn't need to calculate, this isn't gonna be a deck or a floor? This?
Which sheet are you looking at next?
steep slope.
This 2A. So that's not part of your building area, that's just your access area?
That's just for excess, because when you chop the rock, if we wind up using forms and a poured concrete, then you need 1.5 feet at least on the other side. We gave 3-foot allowance. If we use the FCF construction for that, you basically don't need anything on the other side.
And then, I don't want to cut you off, MJ, but the other thing too, on this other sheet that shows your I guess drainage plan,
Right.
the French drains, is that, when you install those, is that calculated into your, it seems to be outside of that area?
The potential one, the potential ones on the north, 2 of them are in steep slope, 1 of them is not.
Right.
And the potential one on the west is not in steep slope.
Right. So is that calculated into your slope disturbance?
No, it's not in steep slope.
This one here? And this one here?
Yes, they're underneath what the sitting deck for the pool would be, which is just basically fill to the same line as the elevation of the deck of the pool.
Yeah, I was trying to flip back and forth between where your limit of disturbance is, and I can't quite figure that out.
Well, if you look at the perimeter on the north side of the pool, toward the east, that's at the 22-foot level, which is the pool deck. So the soil is just going to merge with the natural contour of the land. As you move west, and you get to where the non-steep slope is, there's going to be a short retaining wall underneath where we're filling.
Right, I think I can see, I mean, I can see the basic shape that you've included here, right?
Yeah.
But this seems to be outside of that shape, right? Here's your shape. Isn't this outside of your shape? Up in this area?
That's one of the things that was bothering me when I had,
So,
in terms of.
Look at the calculations, I feel like
Yeah,
it's not.
Yeah, I had written a memo to Mr. Prins about, I don't know, a week and a half ago, because I wanted him to have as much information from us, because, he's been before us a long time, and one of the things I was uncomfortable with, and this is one of the sheets that was bothering me, is I'm still not convinced that we're going to be under the 2,000 foot in terms of both construction and what is disturbed temporarily during construction.
I guess I'm not seeing
so
what you're worried about.
I think you've outlined here all of your areas where you're intruding into our regulated slopes, right? You've made those polygons, right? Here.
Yeah.
So where are those, I mean, just looking at the topo lines and the limit of where this wall is here?
They don't seem to match. It seems like
This
it's
is
going
beyond.
further north.
No, it's just on a different scale. It's 1 to 10 feet instead of 1 to 20 feet.
What do you mean? Isn't this corner? Right here?
Yeah.
Right, so all of this purple, is that calculated into your impact to the slope? This is this corner, everything on the south side of that corner should be included in your calculation, right? This is on the north side of that corner. This is on the north side of this polygon. This area. That's that.
Yeah.
Well, that's what happens when you are scrambling to get your thing in the last day. In an earlier version, I said just draw an arc at the 22-foot level.
Okay,
And let's see how much steep slope we burn up.
right.
And it was too much, so I said, do this. So, all this is showing is where the drainage is gonna go. It doesn't show steep slope disturbance, that's all on this side.
Right, but you're proposing to put a drain here, which is on the north
I
side.
think the architect's assistant, Zach, simply, he wasn't paying attention.
Okay,
Or he would have put it on this side.
right. But even,
which-
Okay,
which
I
we
see
are
what you're saying.
counting as disturbance.
I got you.
But we're talking about 20 square feet.
Well, we're kind of close to that number, aren't we? We're like 200 square feet away from 2,000.
We're not. We're under 1,700 square feet, even with all the allowances.
But
So if I burn 20 square feet here or there, it doesn't make any difference.
Right, but yeah, I think we feel that the allowances are very, very tight. Rather than going into details, you've been before us for a long time, and I'd like to, within reason, try to streamline a little bit of this. So what I'm asking the board right now is, you're asking us to permit something that's on steep slopes and also to a certain extent within wetland and watercourse buffers.
Yeah.
Two things, a pool and pool
Yes.
house and an
one,
addition.
right, and one of them is essentially a non-essential structure. And I think the board has two basic directions to go. One is to tell you, no, we don't want to permit this whatsoever, or the other way to go is, we can make a few more comments to you and then ask you to basically bring in a full set of plans, at which point we can begin the discussions of voting on it or asking on what changes need to be made on those plans. And if you were going to go that route, then I do suggest thinking of all mitigation measures and how possibly you might be able to make something a little bit smaller yet to make it that much more tenable for us. But I think the board needs to decide which way do we want to go. My suggestion is, I think we're at a point now that even though we're uncomfortable, if we feel that we can bargain and mitigate this, then it's time for a full set of plans to be put into action. And some of the things that would be required is, we would need to see full mitigation plans, sediment management, whatever might need to be done in a small SWIP, basically construction sequences.
I'm sorry, the last one was?
Construction sequences,
Which we submitted.
sediment control, how you're going to specifically keep within the 2,000-foot envelope. Are there any ways to make this a little bit smaller? As well as we had discussed briefly last meeting, about deed restrictions. I think it was Rob that brought it up, that for the pool, this is a non-essential structure. How do we ensure that when there's another owner, that all of a sudden the pool is not turned into another house? And that's, you know, relatively simple deed restriction to put in place.
And I was in full agreement with that. Broadly speaking, that works for us.
So, I mean,
We had also, well, I had asked as well that we look at options. I mean, I know you have that breezeway between the standing house and where the, you know, the new living space would be. But I feel like, you know, you're going into the slopes here and we're kind of avoiding the whole process of looking at that space in the middle. I do believe there's an extension design here that would still give you the view that you want when you want to walk in to see the waterfall and pull that whole structure closer to the house. Be a smaller breezeway or no breezeway, but I do think there's a design there. I'd like to see at least that option, you know, proposed, so.
I looked at it, and I looked at it, and I looked at it, and I am so deeply resistant to that. We cut down the size of the addition by about 150 square feet in this iteration. That's about as far as I can go, or what are we doing it for?
And what is the goals of that structure? Just so I'd like to be grounded in the goals. The goals of having a structure there was for bedrooms, I think, right on the ground floor with a bathroom at the ground floor?
It's for a bedroom so my wife and I can live on one floor. We're approaching our mid-70s. We're not, you know.
Right, no, I get that part, yeah. Mhm. Right.
I respect your desire to age in place. I absolutely do. Can you just, I didn't get to ask all my questions before.
No, ask them all. Let's get it.
So the atrium is covered?
Yes, the atrium would basically be glass on the side and
the roof on
and a
top.
same flat roof on top.
Right, so, and that's 268 square feet, the footprint, from the
Yes.
plan, that's what I'm
Yep,
getting.
and that would
So-
serve as a dining room and an entryway.
And the rest of the addition is, what's the footprint for that? I couldn't do the calculation because it's,
Yeah, it's now down to about 750 square feet. 700, somewhere in there. It used to be about 1,100 total, and now it's, you know, well under 1,000.
for that addition onto the
Yeah,
house.
but I looked at that today too, and I said, oh shit, they didn't put the, the total size of the addition on it.
Yeah, that would have been helpful. but-
I can get them to calculate that.
Okay, I'm adding it all up here.
and then just as a digression, I think I probably asked this at an earlier meeting. You wanted more than a lap pool, so there's no way to narrow the pool in your desire.
Well, the issue with narrowing it, and boy, have I looked at this and talked with a lot of different pool enclosure people, is you still need to gap that whole distance of the widest point of your pool with your pool enclosure. So it, in effect, doesn't do me any good to do a pool that goes along on the north side this way and then, you know, cuts at an angle from 17 feet to 12 feet
That's not
wide.
what I was suggesting. For instance, if your main use of the pool was for exercise, you might very well just put in a 10 by 40 whatever pool, because it's, you know, it would be a relatively wide lap pool.
It's a family pool.
Okay, you've
Yeah.
answered that question.
I mean, I'm going to use it for exercise.
Right, okay.
My grandkids will, but I want them to be able to play in it.
So when we look at the pool house, the covered atrium that's also be part of the new built space, and the addition, the bedroom suite addition.
Right.
The calculation that I have from my trusty little iPhone calculator, 2,188 square foot addition to the existing built space on that property.
Well, two different, actually 3 different additions, but
Yes, but on the one property, right?
yes.
That's significant. That's a significant change in a very constrained piece of property. I'd like to hear what my colleagues on the board think, but I have my own thoughts, but
No, it's the question I was gonna ask. I'd like to see an alternative plans. I know you said you looked at it, but taking the ground floor of this existing space and using the atrium and even going out further, could you design what you want? An entranceway that, right down the goals, the entranceway was designed so that you could see that waterfall. That was, a must-have, you said. You have a dining area, you have the bedrooms on the same floor with the bathrooms, and you've got your expanded living space. I gotta feel that there's a design here that could be done, having seen, at least from the outside, the view of that space there, looking into that, where you have that walkway through the breezeway now that's not closed. There's enough space there that I think there's a design that could pull that forward, and then help, get it out of the constrained area.
Pull part of the addition to the west?
Towards the house, towards the existing structure.
Oh, closer to the house.
Right.
Yeah, it could go 2 feet closer without losing the sight line of the waterfall. But then it becomes A, lopsided, and B, you've only got, 9 feet between one set of windows and another set of windows.
Yeah, again, I'm just trying to throw out alternatives
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
I'm not an architect,
And a bit of this is aesthetic, right? If I didn't care for how something looked, I could put it 4 feet away from the other house. Why do you spend $750,000 or whatever it's going to cost to put up a piece of shit?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that I think you could still achieve your goals with, a design that will meet what you want and still accomplish pulling that forward. I mean, there's a lot of space there with that atrium, and normally renovations don't have a huge space between the existing structure open like that. You could have that entranceway on the outside to come over. I can visualize it, but I'm not an architect, so.
Yeah, okay. Well, I've asked them, and we've talked about it a fair amount, but we haven't found something that seems to work yet. But I heard you, I talked with them, and I also heard you about less steep slopes, so by making it smaller, the addition, it's basically between 1 and 3 feet less of elevation that we have to chop. We narrowed the whole bathroom, et cetera, for that purpose. I cut the size of the bedroom, I cut the size of the sitting room.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that, rather than doing some of those things, the spaces could be more livable and have more room in the livable spaces by utilizing that breezeway.
But if you pull it over even 2 feet, you gain almost nothing in terms of steep slope disturbance.
Okay, well, I've said my piece.
Yep.
I don't know what else to say.
Who else? Anybody else?
Yeah, I was about to say, do we have other comments? Because I think otherwise.
I do, but I'm gonna let I've had the floor a lot, so.
So, do we have other comments? Otherwise, we'll go back to MJ.
Luke? Tony?
No, I'm fine.
I'm full of bold plans tonight. I don't know why. But when I look at these 2 projects, your primary suite, your ground floor primary suite, which I completely understand, and I said I absolutely respect your desire to age in place and to make this space comfortable for you, in the future. I think it's a great idea. I feel differently about the pool and the pool house. I think that that is a non-essential structure. I think that it's creating tension with the landscape. I think it, you know, the engineering feat with the steep slopes. You can cut the disturbance in half if you just do your primary main floor project the way that you want to with the atrium. And you give up the pool and the pool house. I would be more comfortable with that than with anything else.
Well, as I said at a prior meeting, our grandkids are more important to us than living on one floor. If we had to abandon something, we would abandon the addition, not the pool. But I don't think we should have to abandon any of them. There's nothing in the code, nothing in the regulations that distinguishes non-essential from essential. If we're not harming the wetlands, what?
They're going to be able to go on boat rides with you.
That's true.
Yeah, and I don't want to separate these two into two different permits because I think we're defeating the CEQA process.
I don't either.
Right?
I don't
think that's
either.
completely defeating.
I'd like to, but
Yeah, I know.
my feeling is if the pool and the pool house were gone, this becomes much easier for me to be able to vote on a permit for this project. and this
I agree with
parcel.
you, and that's why, as I said, I think we really have, you know, two things that we can decide on right now. One is that, you know, as it's proposed, we don't believe that we can permit this. The other way is, if there are some changes and there are a whole bunch of mitigations, are we willing to look at a full set of plans to decide whether we can vote on this or not? So that's what I'd like to, because I think we need to give Mr. Prins some firm guidance of, does he blow out plans that we can look at?
Or is there another space on the property for a pool?
Yep.
Entertain that again, like, you know, cannibalizing one of the other pieces of the property to put the pool there, if that's such an important goal. I mean, but, you know, and that's perfectly acceptable, but
I mean, I'm
there's a
getting.
better place for it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm getting the feeling that I'm very uncomfortable with the pool where it is. You know, I don't know what the solution is, but I'm very uncomfortable. You're uncomfortable with it. I don't know how everybody else,
I'm
again,
not thrilled with it.
yeah, I mean, we're breaking a precedent that we
If it
really
was
haven't.
smaller, potentially, like a lap pool, but it's a huge pool.
Well, it has more to do with the steep slopes, I think, and breaking into those steep slopes than anything else.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to judge somebody because of the size of their pool.
Right.
But it's more about the constraints of the site, which I think is what you meant, Bob.
Yeah, but also, again, it's important that we don't set the ground floor for a new foundation that somebody in 10 years comes back and wants to build a house on. So that's an important, you know,
Right,
but
but
he's already agreed on
We
that.
can
that's
remedy
easy.
that,
Yeah,
right?
that's-
Can we remedy that?
Yeah, and Mr.
Yeah.
Prince has already agreed
Yeah.
that he's fine with that.
Yeah.
So where do we want to go?
We've already approved pools that are 100% within wetlands.
That's not in Philipstown, though, and we have not approved completely 100%, and there has to be major mitigation of why it would be done.
Yeah, and mitigation shouldn't be the issue here.
I mean, my perspective is, I guess the major hurdle is the comfortability of the board, obviously. But when I'm thinking back to other steep slopes violations where we've had to approach homeowners to try to rectify a situation where they violated that section of code, it's usually with vegetation removal in some extreme manner instead of permanently changing the topography.
Contour, yeah.
Yeah.
And in those circumstances, we've imposed major restoration to those areas with native plants and long-term monitoring and maintenance programs. That's something that I don't think has been, I guess, thought of in terms of the long-term scope of this if we were to approach a full set of plans with a mitigation plan that's fully fleshed out. Maybe there's an opportunity. I don't know what the one-to-one is with completely changing the topography and then mitigating for that in some fashion. Maybe there's an opportunity to, plant the steep slopes with natives that, are lacking in that type of habitat in this area, which are the case. There is some interesting habitat in these steeper, rocky areas along the Hudson River Valley. So, I don't know.
It's just such a complicated area with this, with slopes that, I mean, to permanently, chip out all of that rock and change it forever, I don't know.
Well, I mean, the other
But we're not chopping out that much rock. It's in almost all cases, except the basement of the garage. We're chopping 3 feet, 3.5 feet.
It's 3 feet in an area we're talking about at least 1,000 square feet of permanent alteration. That's a lot of material. I mean, I guess the other alternative as well is there is room, probably roughly 25 feet, though we're encroaching further on the wetland buffer, is to move the pool structure to the south. So most of it would be out of the steep slopes.
Yeah, we could move it a little more to the south. You do have, a pool has to be 25 feet away from your drainage field. So there will be.
I don't know exactly where your drainage field is.
It's drawn in on
it's
on
roughly
the first map where Jason would put it. But yes, we could move it forward a couple feet. That would lose another roughly 300 square feet of steep slope disturbance if you moved it 2.5, 3 feet to the south, which is over a gravel area.
Right. So what are everybody's thoughts? I mean, do we want to look at some changes in a full set of plans? Or are we just totally unhappy with this?
I shared my point of view.
Everybody's quiet.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure I'm ready for a full set of plans, but like I've said, I'd like, even at the last meeting, to see on paper an alternative design, pluses and minuses of it. Maybe it's not desirable, from your perspective, but I just think the right architect might be able to do a nice job with that.
Well, I mean, within the guidance of CEQA, I mean, we can basically ask not only for that, but also to ask that the pool be relocated. I mean, we've gone through the exercise, maybe we need to go through it one last time. Because we have just never permitted a non-essential structure of this, significance before. That's not only partially within a wetland
1,200 square
watercourse,
foot.
but in terms of
Yeah.
steep slopes.
Yeah, but steep slope isn't part of your brief.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is.
It's not the way I read Chapter 93, but
We don't only control Chapter 93. So,
It's not, it's not just wetlands and watercourses, it's also steep slope.
above 2,000 square feet of disturbance. Then
below
it goes
2,000.
both to you and to the planning board. Planning board first and then you. Under 2,000, there's no criteria. It's not within
We're not going to have a
the
legal-
scope, but, you
we're
may
not
have a
gonna legal
different view.
discussion on
But
this right now. So,
And I don't like
Request
arguing
counsel
with
if we
you,
want-
but,
If we wanted to discuss the code, we'll have counsel here, that's all. We'll have to request counsel.
Yeah,
I
we
mean,
can bring
you're a
in-
lawyer, we're not, I mean,
Yeah,
you know,
we can
right.
bring in the town
We're
engineer.
not gonna waste time
yeah,
doing
I
it.
just as soon not discuss it either, but since it was discussed, I thought I should add my point of view.
So I'm gathering the consensus of the board is we are very uncomfortable with somewhat the extension on the house and definitely the pool/garage as proposed, and we want to see something else. Does everybody agree?
So we would suggest to him what to do, or ask him to do something and bring it in front of us again to look at?
Yes, we would ask him. It's not our job to make major suggestions like that.
Okay.
So that's, I guess, where we are.
Okay, I've done that on 3 occasions now. I'm not sure what I'm going to do.
Okay.
That's going to please you. Every time we seem to get somewhere and then we go backwards.
We've made some suggestions and they have not been satisfactory to you, so at some point we'll have to, come together, right?
But I did make a bunch of changes that we could live with. Everything's smaller. It uses significantly less steep slope. I use construction techniques where we probably won't even have to burn up the excess. Costs more money, but happy to do it.
Have you, and this is, completely just my personal feeling, not as a position on the board, but have you talked to another architect or some other, group that maybe would have some other types of ideas? I mean, that's not coming from me on the board. That's just my personal recommendation, is maybe there's, this gentleman just doesn't have that expertise. I don't know that firm, so I don't know.
Okay, well, he's got a pretty good roster of clients, so.
And is it not something that anybody wants to do, to split it up into the pool and the modifications?
Yeah, the reason I don't want to do it, and I know I'm in agreement with the town engineer, is we're going against the CEQA process. When basically, State Environmental Quality Review Act, that basically you're looking at changes to a landscape as a whole. So in other words, in a bigger picture, if you were doing a development, even though it might have 4 phases, you're going through the CEQA process, showing all phases, even though you might only build the first one to begin with, so that you're looking at the entire impact.
But in the case where there was no solution to the pool, but there were modifications to the house we could live with, there would be a way?
Well, we would
to
just be,
accommodate.
basically, the pool would be off the table for the time being.
Right.
But we wouldn't want 2 separate permits, because we want to look at it holistically.
Yeah.
Especially,
Right, if there were 2, you would just keep it as a single one, but if there was only.
In other words, I think where we would most
yeah,
likely
he would
go with
amend his
this.
permit, or his application.
Right.
This is a process
Right.
question for me.
Yes, it's a point of
But
process.
otherwise, if what we did is we approved this change, and then all of a sudden, Mr. Prins came back with pretty much the same thing for the pool, I'm sure we wouldn't be in a position where we'd even need to entertain it, because we've already discussed it. So,
But the pool is your focus.
well, it's both. I understand it. I mean, normally what we do is we don't deny things, we make things better. And this is such a constrained site. I think we're all very nervous about it and don't know exactly if all the best options have been shown. And that's where we are right now.
So in what I come back to you with, are you interested in us exploring moving the pool 2 feet further to the south, for example?
I think in your next submittal, I think maybe synthesizing everything you've done in a submission. I know we could all look back and try to compare each rendition of this, but if there was, in the seeker process, if you have your alternatives laid out, one after the other, that might be helpful to see kind of, I know you're much closer to the minutia, than the board is each month. And looking at these new drawings and renderings of the slope analysis, or, and all those things. So, if you look at it again from where you started to where you are now, I mean, those steps get you closer to that each time,
I mean, for instance, while the pool you're proposing is not a gigantic pool, and I believe it's, 17 by 48? That's not a small pool, particularly in a confined site.
Yeah, it's also not a large pool.
So,
My
you have a
buddy
very
Lee
constrained
Seepel
site.
has, 60 by 20.
not arguing, but unfortunately, you're in a site that is very constrained in many different ways.
And I mean, even the, the error with the drawings here and all that, I don't, just for the board's, the clarity to make sure that we're all looking at the correct analysis is really important,
Yeah,
obviously.
I'll go over that with them.
We don't
yeah.
know where you're pulling the numbers from at that point, right? I can't, I don't know what to, I don't know if your calculation leaves us in or out, when you look at, the total square footage of disturbance.
Yep, I'll go over that. And this set of maps came out of a meeting I had with Beatty and Watson, who went over what they thought you and Ron Gaynor would want to see. And I said, should you guys do it, or should the architects do it? And they said, well, your architect did the first set. Your architect is fully qualified to do it. They're going to do the same things we would do, so have your architect do it. So we had our architect do it. And, things do get hurried on the last day, and Cheryl even gave me an extra day. But with the Jewish holidays and everything for them, they were scrambling, so.
Yeah, no, I just, as a point of clarity for everybody, I think that just helps, move things forward.
Yeah, so basically you'd like something where I can show the very first thing we submitted, which was drawn before we had any steep slope analysis, and when we looked at it after the steep slope, we said to ourselves, nah, it doesn't work. And then we backed way off, and now I've backed off further. But there's a point you back off to, and there's not enough left to be worth doing it.
Right.
Well, that's part of the seeker process, even looking at the no action alternative, but that's not necessarily what you pursue. It's just, you look at that spectrum, and eventually you can use that to fall on that middle ground potentially.
Yep, okay, and I thought I heard somebody floating maybe looking at that other site again, but that's a lot worse from, I would think, everybody's perspective.
That's in the scenic protection overlay,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
That hits that threshold. And we
This
also
one
talked
you-
about
you-
that being habitat, I think you mentioned. That's,
Yeah, I mean, that's the bobcat
Recognized.
likes to hide out there, and
you don't want him coming for a
and
swim
lots
with
of
you.
other animals. He's not going to want to hang out there, or she. I don't know which one it is. If we've got some screaming kids playing in a pool there.
Let's look at the progression of where we were. If there's anything that comes to mind with you, and particularly your architect, of where we might be able to get out of steep slopes, let's look at that. But I really think all of us at the next meeting need to be at a position that we're either asking Mr. Prins that, potentially for a full set of plans, so then we can eventually give him, and when I say eventually, sooner rather than later, give him a permit and do
For something.
something, right? With
For
different
something.
mitigations, yep. Or we just say to him, we don't believe this is gonna work. But I think he's been before us with a lot of different things. I think we need to now get to that point. And I'm sorry it's taken so long, but this is it's a difficult project, and you have worked with us, and we just need a little
Admit
bit.
it's a difficult project.
Yeah.
I've tried to be very careful to do something that I think works, that isn't destroying any environment, which I care about as much as you do.
What would help, especially you, Max, that would be maybe different than being on a plan like this to show the impact and kind of the plus and minus around the cutting into the steep slopes, that would help to understand that more, maybe like a totalization chart or something like that, kind of like showing each of the areas, and then, what kind of impact it is to bring it up to the total and away from the, the.
Yeah, I
septic disturbance.
I think is building on MJ's point by looking at the total square footage of disturbance and then looking at it in each category, wetlands buffer or stream buffer, and then steep slopes. I think that question is really what could focus and drive your mitigation plan ultimately, in terms of guiding you as what what would be valuable to be in a mitigation plan, what would offset the impact in some way.
That's an excellent idea. I didn't take it that far. I was just looking at footprint and overall footprint, like new footprint. But when you just clarified for me that's exactly what we need to see. We need to know how much steep slope, how much wetlands, how much,
Right.
That would be great.
And that's a basic part of the application anyway.
Yeah.
And I
Which
think,
is
Mr.
so.
Go ahead,
Sorry.
sorry.
No, which you probably filled out initially, way early on when you first came to the board. Sorry.
Yeah, and I think Mr. Prins has been willing, though we need to see more information on it, right now, the septic system that exists is probably somewhat grandfathered. He's willing to put in a much more significant system, as well as do additional mitigation to the tidal wetland.
So
And there might be other work that can be done also.
I have a question about the septic and there's going to be a new primary bedroom, so wouldn't the septic have to be replaced
Yes, it
anyway?
would.
So that cannot be considered as mitigation? Because it has to be replaced.
It has
no
to be
matter what.
redone, but again, more likely than not, he'd probably be doing a traditional system rather than looking at a Fuji system. So I think that counts
That's
as
a
a little
plus.
bit of, yes, it's a
That's a
plus.
plus.
Yeah, it's a plus, yeah.
Definitely a plus.
I look at it as a plus.
Well,
so,
particularly for your site,
yeah, it's a plus.
Yeah.
it's a
yeah,
win.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who knows what, Steve Marino comes out periodically and he says, your wetlands are doing really fine. He doesn't see any sign that drain field is getting the wrong stuff into the actual water when the tide comes in.
Yeah.
So, I'm happy if he said, no, you got crap, going on here, we would try and figure out a way to remedy that, because I don't want that happening.
Sure.
But on mitigation, so far where you seem to be heading was things in the wetlands or the wetland buffer. I can see possibilities also with the steep slope. Right now that wild wisteria has kind of been running around there, but boy, would I love to introduce and see if we could get mountain laurel going. There's a bunch of it over at Manitoga, and I'm sure 50 and 100 years ago there was a bunch of it down by us. I've only found 3 plants on our property.
I don't want to get too far ahead, but your neighbor had a steep slopes violation that we required him to do a mitigation plan for. And so he retained a company that came up with a whole suite of, planting introductions that were natives that were, really great, I thought, and an improvement ultimately.
Which is that the Heron, Bill Heron?
Yeah.
Okay, because I don't see much in the way of mitigation there anymore.
Yeah.
And of course he cut down 10 trees last spring.
Yeah.
But just for the sake of clarifications, are we leaning towards coming up with mitigation proposals, or actually moving the site, or a combination thereof. Because I would hate for Mr. Prince to go down the road of coming up with mitigation. In the end, we're gonna turn around and say, it's still a huge pool in a spot that we're not comfortable with. So I think we should be clear on how much of each contributes to a successful
I
proposal.
mean, I think we're all saying we're looking for a combination,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, to be as clear as I can be, I'm deeply uncomfortable with the pool. But that being said, yeah, we need to, I mean, obviously, we need to work with the landowner and figure out the middle way.
I
Right.
think, and the mitigation plan, I think, it needs to be done no matter what,
Yeah.
you know? And
We'd
even,
always have to have
understand that.
mitigation.
I just didn't, we were embracing the mitigation
Even the
plan so much,
concept,
I didn't want somebody to, wouldn't want you to come back and say, well, I've got this great mitigation plan, and we're still gonna say, yeah, but the pool is still a problem.
but that, yeah, it's such a critical component to the offset everything that he's proposing at this
I
point.
understand that.
You know, especially because he's, you know,
Yeah, I think we all see eye to eye on that, and what I've put in front of you by way of mitigation so far are kind of trying to read your minds as to what you're looking for, and what I think, based on spending a lot of time keeping invasives out of that marsh, would be, good for that marsh.
The question is, do offsets exist that can offset the cost of the environmental costs, or what we feel the environmental cost of the pool? And it may be that there's not, without moving the pool.
yeah.
I just want to, like I said, I'm just trying to be clear.
Yeah.
All right, anything else?
Nope, I think that's enough.
Sorry to have burned up so much of your time,
That's
but
what we're here for.
I
That's what we're here for.
I think you feel and I feel we need to come to a solution or a close.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any unfinished business or any reports from you,
Stormwater?
Mac?
No stormwater updates this month.
Okay, so,
And we scheduled that site visit.
yes.
Yes, get right on that.
We're getting right on it.
So very quick, because I'm sure everybody is feeling the time change with the hour forward, losing that bit of sleep. But I wanted the Conservation Board to know that at one of our recent town board workshops, it was actually a meeting of the Comprehensive Plan Committee that was talking with the town board about kind of some of the high priorities from their point of view for the next year, and the conservation subdivision conversation came up because that's been on their mind, and obviously the Conservation Board has been bringing up concerns about the conservation subdivision, and at the same time we've had Hudson Highlands Reserve in front of the town board asking for a zoning modification. So that whole conversation has been in the air, and at the workshop, because of the realization that there is some concern about the existing state of the conservation subdivision code, the town board and Supervisor Van Tassel asked town council to look into a moratorium on conservation subdivision. And so I wanted to pass that along to you. And at that meeting, the Hudson Highlands Land Trust also said that they thought that they could be helpful potentially in looking for expertise or guidance that would give some advice on how the conservation subdivision could be looked at differently. And so the town board thought that the best thing, there was a discussion about other large land parcels and how those could come up at some point, and leaving the conservation subdivision open at this time could be concerning. And so Supervisor Van Tassel made it, he felt that, so I think it's been positive. All of the efforts of the Conservation Board to raise those concerns, I think, have been important. Supervisor Van Tassel really made the point that he thought that the consideration of conservation subdivision should happen at the town board. It shouldn't be kind of, in different pieces at different levels. But so that, I think, is a positive development. And so I guess it'll be interesting to see how the Hudson Highlands Land Trust, if they can come up with some guidance to open that discussion. There was no timeline put on it, but I just wanted to quickly pass that on to the the Conservation
Were
Board.
there, what were the remaining parcels that they identified? Were there any?
No, it was like a kind of a discussion about like, oh, imagine if the Capuchin Youth Ministry, or imagine if St. Basil. It was just like there are some large parcels of land in the town of Philipstown. It was kind of like if those came up, and
We need,
Or Grandma, yeah.
we need to look at the open space index that we created however many years ago, to look at those large parcels and see,
It's all available.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yep. Yep. Any
So-
other questions? Yeah.
So Jason, a moratorium is imminent?
No, I mean, I would just say that the town board asked town council to
Consider.
to consider and to look into what a moratorium would look like, and to come back to the board with some guidance on what a moratorium would look like, so.
And then HHLT is looking for a policy consultant that might be able to assist
Exactly,
drafting some new.
exactly.
Law.
Someone who has expertise in conservation subdivision,
Fabulous.
regulation, and law, so, yeah, so thank you all
If you
for
need
your.
our help in any way, I think, right?
Yeah.
We stand ready.
Okay, so I'll keep you up to date on that process as it goes forward.
How is this going to affect the going situation?
With the Hudson Highlands Reserve, not going to affect it, because it's kind of the current books on the law, and we can have a different conversation about that zoning modification, but probably not when people feel like it's 10:30, when it's 9:30. But if Andy, if you have any questions about it, or any of the Conservation Board members, call me, I'll keep you updated. But thank you for all of the work you did to kind of push that issue up the ladder, because I think it had an impact. So,
Thank you.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you. All right, so now, a very important motion. We have a motion to adjourn the meeting. Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.